Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Tom Bukovac. He's going to share some stories about playing guitar on tour with Joe Walsh.
I was playing with Vince Gill, touring with him, right? My old buddy Joe Walsh, called me, who's been Joe's drummer for 50 years. They've been best friends since 1968, those two guys, right? So I've known Joe Walsh for probably 20 years, no, probably more than that, 25 years. When I first moved to Nashville, he started calling me for sessions. I would go stay at his house and record with him. And he's a great musician, plays great piano, flute. He produced all those Walsh records, wrote a lot of songs with Joe. He wrote like Rocky Mountain Way, and he wrote Pretty Maids All in a Row and shit, from the Hotel California record. And so Joe and I, Vitale, were friends for a long time, and I remember him texting me and said, "Buko, call me. I got some work for you." I remember him saying that, and I was like, "Oh, geez, I wonder if it's a session or something, and it turned out, he goes, "Man, Waddy Wachtel, who'd been playing guitar on that previous year Joe Walsh tour, had to do Stevie Nicks because I think that was like a conflict of interest there. Like, Waddy's always been Stevie's guy, right? So he couldn't do both gigs, and also he had to choose which one he wanted to do, so he had to pick the Stevie Nicks gig. They needed a rhythm guy, so I had never met Walsh before. I knew so much about him because he was really, like, being from Cleveland myself, he was the only guy that ever made it out of Cleveland, you know what I mean? So my whole childhood, all I ever heard about was Joe Walsh. So he was like a mythical figure to me growing up, And I was really happy when I first met Joe Vitale to hear all the Walsh stories, because he's got the greatest stories, you can imagine. So I was like, gee, man, well, I'm kind of committed to the Vince Gill tour next year, but I would sure like to try this, because he's a childhood sort of hero and big influence on the way I played, right? I called Vince, and I was just sort of like, hey, man, I was didn't want to really come out and say it, He's like, "Joe Walsh called you to play?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "You got to go do that, man." He was super cool about it. Vince is the coolest. Super understanding about that. So I went out I think one of the first moments was I flew out to LA to sort of sit with Joe and Waddy in Joe's old house that he used to live in LA, where he had all his dark days. He doesn't live in that house anymore, but he still owns the house. So that's the first time I met Joe Walsh. So we were all in that house together, just, those two fucking knuckleheads and me, and we're all just like, here's what I was playing on Rocky Mountain Way, and just sitting in a circle with these crappy little practice amps, Here's what I was playing on this and this, and I just sat with them, and, it was great. And it's like one of those moments where you kind of pinch yourself going, wow, man, this is pretty surreal, I just sort of slipped into that gig. I remember the first time I played with them was at the House of Blues in Vegas. And the first thing I noticed, I played a lot of gigs in my life with lots of people. I've been an eternal sideman, backed up so many singers of all styles of music. And the first thing I noticed about Joe in that gig was I've never seen people in the crowd so violently with somebody. The first couple of chords, the first song, I was like, oh my God, look at these people. They feel like they know him. They're so behind him. Like that sort of ordinary average guy image that he sold, I'm just one of you guys, I'm just an ordinary guy. They buy into that, whether it's real or not, man, and they just feel like they know him, man. Love you, Joe. And I just was like, wow, I've never seen, it's like, some football teams have like really fucking violent fans that just live and die with that team. That's how his fans are. And Vince himself, first thing he said, he goes, have you ever seen anybody who has that kind of power over a crowd? He's like, he noticed it too. He was like, the way that Joe's fans are just so with him, man. It's like amazing. And man, you could be on fire up on there on that stage and nobody would even notice you're there. They're looking at him, man. You know what I mean? It's amazing. And he just has a way of really connecting with people, you know. And Joe is a gear addict. He's got lockers full of gear all over LA, and some of them he hasn't been in years, man. You know, he's just a hoarder, you know. Thousands of guitars and stuff that he owns, and I've been told that he has entire Moog modular systems and, you know, everything, millions of amps and things. You know, he loves buying gear, but it's not just old gear. He likes new gear too. He's not a purist as far as it has to be old. You know, I'm like that, but he's not. He'll play a damn brand new $300 Ibanez on a gig. Like he doesn't care. He'll play a Squier. He'll play a brand new run-of-the-mill Les Paul, some $500 Stratocaster. He doesn't care. And I always noticed that even though he owns tons of killer old guitars, he never brings them on the road. He won't bring them out. I do. I like to bring all my cool old shit on the road. I like to play it, you know. But he's like, I'm not bringing that on the road, you know. He doesn't, you know, you'd think that he wouldn't care. Even Vince Gill, you know, when I play with him, he brings all his cool old shit out, you know. As long as you take care of it, it's going to be okay. But Joe won't bring any of his old stuff out, which I always thought was kind of odd, you know. Because he was always sort of known as like a poster boy for vintage guitars to begin with, you know. I remember when we got done rehearsing that one day at this place in L.A., I said, I know you've been through a lot of guitars, you know. Is there any that you lost or you got rid of that you really wish you had back? And he said, oh, yeah, man, it's the blue telly with the stars on it. I'm like, what? He doesn't really remember a lot of things, you know. Things get very foggy. But he said, yeah, I've been looking for it forever. I go, what was it? He says, a blue telly, it had stars on it. Do you remember, like, what year? Because I think it was like a 64 or 65. And that's what I played on Funk 49. And I was like, really? I thought, you know, I'd always hear rumors that it was a Strat or whatever, but he insisted that it was a blue telly. He couldn't really remember any details except that it had stars on it. And I'm assuming it must have been a rosewood board, transition logo, 64, 65, if in fact that's what it was. Maybe I'll talk about it on my channel. Maybe somebody out there knows of an old telly that has stars. I go, how big were the stars? And he said, about that big. The story changes every time you ask him something. It's very foggy. But then Vitali came walking over, and he's like, what are you guys talking about? And I said, well, Joe was just saying that he really wishes he could find that blue telly with the stars on it that he played on Funk 49. And Vitali goes, that was a Strat. And he was like, he was there, you know. So it's all very foggy. And I wonder if there is some mythical blue telly with stars on it that's out there that really he really did play on Funk 49, you know. When I got that gig, I was very studious about doing my homework. I wanted to be very prepared for that gig. I studied probably more than I needed to. I've always loved those records, so they were already in there. And then I studied them even further, right? Even though I already knew the tunes, I really, really studied. And then I studied all the live versions, and then I studied the board tapes of the recent tour that they sent me, you know, with Waddy playing. And see, Waddy's like a gunslinger, you know, amazing guitar player, but he's not real worried about playing the like original parts, you know. He does his own thing, and it's amazing, right? There would be times when he'd be like soloing over Joe's solos and stuff, and I'm like, you know, as a session player, I am programmed to not solo over someone else's solo. When someone's like Joe Walsh is playing a solo, I'm playing rhythm, right? And I'm going to try to make a nice bed for him to solo over. That's what I do. I guess it came across like I was playing more timidly than Waddy because I was playing more rhythm. You know, I'm not a gunslinger like Waddy. You know, Waddy's a real gunslinger, and I appreciate that. I'm a rhythm guy. I can gunsling if I need to, and if I have to, and I will when it's called for. But my natural inclination is to play nice rhythm. You know, play the parts. So that's what I was doing, and I think like, you know, I remember I had a couple comments early on like, you got to play out more. You got to play out more. You know, you got to come on, Buko, play out more. And I kept thinking like, what do you mean play out where I'm playing the fucking parts that are on the record? He's playing the lead, I'm playing the rhythm. You know, that's what it's supposed to be. And I remember about a month or two into the tour, you know, I didn't think it was going very well. Like I didn't think Joe liked me very much, and you know, he never said anything, but I just didn't get the vibe like it was all really working out that great. And then he wanted to work up a new tune, so he said, "Come into my dressing room the next day, and I want to show you what I'm playing." He wanted to do Confessor, right? Remember that track? Yeah. Great song. And so, sure enough, next day at the sound check, the tour manager comes over. Joe wants to see you in his dressing room. So I go in there, you know, in this giant dressing room, and Joe's like, you know, mowing down some catering in there. And I walk in, and he comes over and he gives this big hug, man. He's like, "Man, I just want to tell you, you're coming on real strong." And I was like, "Thanks, man. I feel like I came in with the wrong attitude. Maybe I came in, you know, knowing the record too much, you know." And he's like, "Nah, man, you came in just right. It's a learning curve." I'll never forget him saying that. And then he goes, you know, he showed me this bit he's playing on the Confessor with this real raunchy little practice amp, you know, all distorted, and I'm just like, he goes, "You got it?" Yeah, man, I think I got it, man. And so we're just about to wrap it up, and I said to him, I go, "Hey, man, can I ask you a question, man?" He's like, "Yeah, what do you want to know?" I said, because we had been through these long days of rehearsals where they were bringing in pallets full of amps for him to try, 2 at a time, bringing them in like song after song. And every amp he plugged into sounded exactly the same. It just sounds like Joe Walsh. So I said to him, I go, "How is it, man, that whether you're playing through a Marshall or just this little practice amp, you just sound so much like Joe Walsh, you know?" And he goes, "It's a secret, man. Don't tell anybody." And I'm like, "Okay." And he said, I think he was kidding, or I wouldn't be saying this now, but he goes, "You see this?" And he hands me an old Herco pick, like you know, we grew up playing when we were kids with the ribs on them. He goes, "I play with the shoulder of the pick, where you get all that." He goes, "That's what gives me my sound." And I'm like, he goes, "You got to try it sometime. There's a bunch of picks up on my amps." And I go, "Oh man, that's your thing, man." He goes, "Fuck it, man, we're in the same band." And then it just made me laugh, because I go, "Have you always done that, Joe?" He goes, "Yeah, man, James Gang." And and I said, you know what really cracks me up about that is just like that fact that he thinks that is a secret. You know, so many guitar players have used that ribbed part of the Herco for their sound. You know, I love that he like keeps that in his mind as a secret. It's so beautiful to me. It's so sweet. But you know, that is a sound, man. When you take one of those old gray Hercos like Jimmy Page used to use, and it's like a kerrang, man. When you scrape it on that string, instead of just going donk like a regular pick, it goes like, you know, it's like a knife edge because of that serrated. And man, it's a sound, and it's a very usable and cool sound. I do it all the time for certain things. It's really great when you're playing like a dirty lead and you want it to have some attitude. Like each note has teeth on it when you just go into that instead of just a donk, you know. And that was his big secret, you know, that he talked about. I learn things through osmosis. I do better when somebody's not trying to show me something. I learn by watching people. I learn by seeing somebody do something, and I'm like, "Oh fuck yeah, that's exactly how you do that." You know, probably not as good at, like, if somebody sits me down and tries to show me something. I like to like watch and learn. So I observed a lot of things, you know, that he would do, you know, that I was like, of course, that's how you do that. Yes. And one of those moments where I was like, of course. We were opening the set with this tune called Meadows. You remember it? It's the same riff as My Woman from Tokyo by Deep Purple. It's literally the same riff. I don't know which one came first, but it's like, it starts off with an electric 12-string going, dum blah 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 blah, right? So the first thing you hear, opening bit of the song, first song in an arena is my pitiful ass up there playing a plugged-in electric 12-string, going dum blah blah before the band comes in, right? And when I play an electric 12-string, I like the way when you just brush the strings on a clean electric 12-string with compression and some nice treble added, you get that feathering, like somebody cracked an egg over your head, and it's got that beautiful, real sort of pleasing liquid kind of sound. And like when I play electric 12-string, I like to get that tone where it's like real jangly and sort of feathery, you know. So he's watching me at sound check, you know, practice, trying to play this intro to the song, and I'm playing it real chill. Because it's like, that's how I like that guitar to sound, you know. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, he goes, play it again. I'm like, I play it. He goes, man, you're playing a fucking arena. You know, don't be fucking feathering this thing. We're playing the fucking 40,000 people, and you're the first thing we see playing this riff, you know. You know, don't be like all gentle, feathering, you know. Like, and the obvious things like, yes, of course. Yes, you're right, Joe. Sorry, I'm an idiot. You know, he's real picky about certain things. Like, if you're too loud, he hates it. And if you're too quiet, he hates it. Like when you're playing rhythm next to him, you got to be at just the right volume. Like if he can't hear you, he gets pissed. And if you're too loud, he can't take it. So it's like, you come over and it's like, you're killing me on Rocky Mountain Way. I'm like, okay, man, I'll turn it down. And then the next night, he's like, I can't hear you. You know, he says like, I remember him saying to me one time, because I had my amps pointed at me in a wedge. And like, he goes, your guitars sound like this. And because all he was hearing was the side of the amp, you know? And then I realized, oh, duh, okay, I should point it a bit at him. So I sure enough, I turned the amp a bit and he's like, that's better. You know, he liked it when I played Firebird. I used an old reverse Firebird, you know, and he really liked that guitar. He liked the way it sounded for his music. I like that Firebird. He would always say that. I do love the guy, man. We're supposed to do some more gigs coming up, you know, and I was very proud to be a part of that Barnstorm reunion. That was a big televised concert. He had the original Barnstorm back together, Kenny Passarelli, Joe Walsh, and him. And he had me play with him. And it was great to play rhythm in that, because it was billed as like the first time Barnstorms played together and so and so. So it was me adding supplemental guitars and Jimmy Wallace adding keyboards. But man, it was great. I think it was, what's that channel? Access or something. It was on there, played a million times on there. And it was in Denver. We did it, I remember. And I was very proud to be a part of that, because it was, you know, it was a kind of epic moment for Joe Walsh fans at Barnstorm reunion, you know.
Did that tour go to Cleveland?
Yeah, man, it was really cool to see. Like, yeah, you know, a lot of old friends came out to that, and you know, they couldn't believe that their old buddy was up there playing with Walsh. You know, yeah.
What was the venue?